Three football players from the University of Virginia were shot dead, and two others were injured after a shooter allegedly opened fire on a bus full of students returning from a field trip. According to university police, the suspect is a student at the school, Christopher Darnell Jones. He was arrested after a massive manhunt and a shelter-in-place order for all students and staff. Police say the shooting happened at 10:30 p.m. Sunday night on the campus in Charlottesville, Virginia. In the minutes immediately following, school officials issued alerts on social media, with one tweet saying to run, hide, fight. University of Virginia President Jim Ryan.
The shootings occurred on a bus full of students returning from a field trip. 3 of the victims did not survive. They were Devin Chandler, a second year from Virginia Beach, Virginia, Lavelle Davis, a third-year student from Ridgeville, South Carolina, and Deshaun Perry, a fourth-year student from Miami, Florida. All 3 were members of the football team. 2 other students were wounded and are being treated for injuries at the UVA Medical Center. 1 is in good condition, 1 is in critical condition.
Jones, who was apprehended off campus, was held on 3 counts of second-degree murder and 3 counts of using a handgun in the commission of a felony, according to UVA Police Chief Tim Longo, who was told of the suspect's apprehension during the press conference.
We just received information the suspect is in custody.
Jones, who was listed as a player on the school's football team in 2018, came to the attention of the University of Virginia's threat assessment team this fall, but was cleared after an investigation. The UVA shooting is the latest episode of gun violence on U.S. college and high school campuses. The bloodshed has fueled debate over tighter restrictions on access to guns in the United States, where the U.S. Constitution's Second Amendment guarantees the right to bear arms.
After regaining control of the Senate and exhaling a sigh of relief, Democrats in Congress have their work cut out for them. They're looking to make the most of their current thin majorities in both chambers before the new Congress is sworn in on January 3rd, a period known as the lame duck session. The goals are high. Congressional Democrats aim to pass bills protecting same-sex marriage, clarifying lawmakers' roles in certifying presidential elections, and raising the nation's debt ceiling. Both House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen signaled that addressing the nation's looming debt ceiling would be a priority during the lame duck session. One reason? Republicans have threatened to use the next hike in the $31.4 trillion debt ceiling, expected in the first quarter of 2023, as leverage to force concessions from U.S. President Joe Biden. The House already passed legislation legalizing gay marriage.
The bill is passed.
And the Senate was poised as soon as this week to approve its slightly different version of the Respect for Marriage Act bill. This to ensure gay marriage rights continue, despite the Supreme Court's hint at intervening. Another high priority item is a bipartisan bill reinforcing the way Congress certifies presidential elections, intended to avoid another January 6th, when supporters of former President Donald Trump stormed the Capitol in an attempt to stop lawmakers from certifying Biden's win. Democratic leaders also aim to pass legislation fast-tracking permits for energy projects and provide more financial and military assistance to Ukraine, as some Republicans have expressed their reluctance to do so.
U.S. stocks fell on Monday after a choppy session as investors digested comments from Federal Reserve officials about plans for more interest rate hikes. The Dow fell nearly 0.2%, the S&P 500 dropped about 0.9%, while the Nasdaq fell more than 1%. Fed Chair Lael Brainerd signaled that the pace of rate hikes may soon slow. That helped lift stocks for much of the afternoon, but Fed fears took hold at the end of the session, and Michael Landsberg, Chief Investment Officer at Landsberg's Bennett Private Wealth Management, said it was a mistake to think the Fed might soon back off its fight against inflation.
I think there's still this belief that the Fed's going to pivot. I think people are, I think when you hear anything from a Fed governor that says, oh, we might slow the rate of, change, people go, oh, that's a pivot. I think it's a mistake, but I think people are just reading into anything.
Shares of Amazon ended more than 2% lower following reports the e-commerce giant was planning to lay off about 10,000 people in corporate and technology jobs, starting as soon as this week. That follows other tech giants announcing big cuts to their payrolls, and Landsberg says the pain isn't over yet.
I mean, Microsoft, Amazon, I mean, you're talking, these are creme de la creme companies. This isn't some, little shady, crypto environment here. These are as blue chip as it gets, and they're laying off a lot of people. That indicates to me that, the tech is still overowned, still probably overvalued. And at least the executives there are starting to realize that, our earnings aren't going to be what we thought they're going to be. We're going to need to cut expenses.
Other mega caps, including Microsoft and Tesla, fell more than 2%, but shares of Meta Platforms gained 1%, and shares of Biogen and Eli Lilly gained after the failure of Swiss rival Roche's Alzheimer's drug candidate, which could not be shown to slow dementia progression in 2 drug trials.
The Middle East's Fertile Crescent is drying up. It's an arc sweeping from the Mediterranean to the Persian Gulf, nourished by the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, and it's believed to be where farming developed more than 10,000 years ago. But now the region is facing a severe water crisis, which could fuel more turmoil in the Middle East as communities struggle over dwindling water resources. In Iraq, a prolonged drought has only worsened in recent years. Abbas Elwan drilled well after well, desperate to find water for his family's parched farmlands in the south. It was an area that once produced enough wheat and barley to sustain his extended family. But after another failed attempt in August, he took his own life. This is his brother Ali Elwan.
The last season he harvested 25 tons. And during the 3 years, from 2020 to 2022, there was nothing. We stopped completely. Because there is no water and no rain. So we stopped completely.
Farmers in neighboring Syria and Turkey are also struggling. Syria saw its worst drought in more than 70 years in 2021, according to the International Rescue Committee. Harvests across the country were hit hard. Musa al-Sheko is a shepherd in Syria's Aleppo countryside.
This will lead to famine because this is our main source of income, and if this source disappears, it will leave us with 2 choices: either to immigrate or die of famine.
Syria's long-running civil war grew out of anti-government protests in 2011, following a long drought that hit crop yields and livestock and drove people into cities. In Turkey's southeast, where the Tigris and Euphrates draw their waters, rainfall in the year to September was about a third below the average of the previous 3 decades, data from Turkey's meteorological agency showed. Both Iraq and Syria depend in part on water flow from Turkey.
There is a drought affecting the wells, and water level in Euphrates has reached a very low level. Before we used to get water from a very close distance, but now the water is 400 meters away.
Some Syrian officials accuse Turkey of cutting the Euphrates flow over the last 2 years to half the level it committed to in a 1987 accord, a charge Ankara denies. Almost 90% of rain-fed crops in Iraq, mostly wheat and barley, failed this season, according to the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization. Abdel Wahad al-Yazri, a provincial deputy governor for agriculture and water in southern Iraq, has already begun to observe competition for water and conflict between farming communities.
As a result of water scarcity, there are social problems. And there will be more problems because of water scarcity. Water scarcity causes disputes between people from neighboring areas. Those downstream want water, and they consider that those upstream took the water. But in reality, it is water scarcity that caused the problems.
President Zelensky, is this the beginning of the end of the war?
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskiy arrived in Kherson on Monday, greeted with cheers in the newly liberated city as residents gathered to raise the Ukrainian flag.
Kherson is Ukraine forever. It was Ukraine, it is Ukraine, it will be Ukrainian all the time.
Kherson is the biggest victory Ukrainian troops have won so far, And Zelensky vowed to drive out Russia from all its occupied territory.
We're ready for peace, but our peace for our country is all our country, all our territory. We respect the law and respect sovereignty of all the countries, but now we are speaking about our country. That's why we are fighting against Russian aggression.
Escorted by armed bodyguards, Zelensky told a gathering of soldiers that they had proved it was impossible to kill Ukraine before a silent tribute to troops who died during the offensive. Russian troops left behind a city in ruins, buildings and infrastructure destroyed and littered with landmines. The only bridge linking Kherson city to Russian-controlled territory was destroyed, according to local Ukrainian officials, by Russia. Zelensky said earlier Ukraine had already gathered evidence of at least 400 war crimes committed by Russian troops during their occupation of the area, including killings and abductions.
The Russian army left behind the same savagery it did in other regions of the country it entered.
Residents in and around Kherson, interviewed by Reuters, have described killings and abductions under Russian occupation. Russia denies its troops target civilians or have committed atrocities in occupied areas. Mass burial sites have been found in other parts of Ukraine previously occupied by Russian troops, including some with civilian bodies showing signs of torture. The United Nations on Monday called for Russia to be held accountable for its invasion of Ukraine, approving a resolution recognizing that Russia is responsible for reparation in the country.